November the 2nd, 1942. A suffocating tent in the Egyptian desert, miles behind the screaming front lines of El Alamein. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stood over a map table, staring at a single sheet of paper that had just been handed to him, his face draining of color. What he whispered next wasn't a command but a condemnation that would seal the fate of the Third Reich. He didn't scream. He didn't throw the table. He simply looked at his aide, his eyes hollowed by dysentery and exhaustion, and realized the man he served was not a military genius, but a madman. The Desert Fox had been outmaneuvered not by the British, but by Berlin, the myth of the invincible. To the world, he was a god of war. The British press idolized him. Churchill grudgingly praised him in the House of Commons. His own propaganda machine painted him as the unstoppable commander who ate breakfast in Libya and dinner in Cairo. But inside the command tent, the reality was a rotting corpse. By late 1942, the Afrika Korps wasn't an army. It was a ghost. They were fighting on fumes. Petrol tankers were being sunk by the Royal Navy before they even saw the Italian coast. Men were drinking radiator water. They were scavenging British bully beef just to survive. Rommel knew the math. He was a creature of logistics and speed, and he knew both were gone. General Bernard Montgomery sat across the line with overwhelming force. He had the tanks, he had the fuel, he had the air superiority. Rommel had a reputation and a few dozen panzers running on empty. He had sent urgent cables to Hitler weeks before. He begged for supplies. He begged for reinforcements. He explained in clear tactical German that without fuel his tanks were just steel coffins. Berlin's response? Silence. Or worse, delusional promises of wonder weapons and barges that would never arrive. Rommel looked at his men. Gaunt faces, uniforms bleached white by the sun, eyes red from the sandstorms. They trusted him. They believed that if anyone could pull a miracle out of this hellscape, it was the Desert Fox. He knew he was about to fail them. The attack came at night. Montgomery didn't play games. He launched Operation Lightfoot with an artillery barrage so intense it reportedly made the ground shake in Alexandria, 60 miles away. 1,000 guns, all firing at once. For the German and Italian troops in the forward trenches, it was the apocalypse. The sky turned into a sheet of fire. The noise was physical, a wall of pressure that ruptured eardrums and collapsed lungs. Rommel wasn't even there when it started. He was in a hospital in Germany, treating his chronic illness. He rushed back, defying doctors, flying into a war zone that was already lost. When he arrived at his headquarters, the situation was catastrophic. The British were grinding through the minefields, the devil's gardens Rommel had planted. They were taking heavy losses. Yes, but they had the reserves to absorb them. Rommel did not. For every tank Rommel lost, it was gone forever. For every tank Montgomery lost, 2 more rolled off the ship in Alexandria. By November 2nd, the Afrika Korps was broken. The defensive line had been pierced. The fuel reserves were critical. Rommel made the only military decision that made sense. The only moral decision. He ordered a retreat. He prepared the orders to fall back to Führer, a defensible position to the west. It would save the core of his army. It would save the lives of tens of thousands of young men who could fight another day. He sent the signal to Berlin. Fighting impossible. Withdrawal necessary to save the army. He waited for the rubber stamp. In the German military tradition, the commander on the ground had the final say. Berlin was thousands of miles away. They didn't smell the cordite. They didn't see the bodies. He was wrong. The response from the Führer bunker arrived at 1:30 p.m. on November 3rd. Rommel took the paper. He expected approval. He expected a strategic acknowledgement of the situation. Instead, he read words that felt like a physical blow. To Field Marshal Rommel. It is with trusting confidence in your leadership and the courage of the German-Italian troops under your command that the German people and I are following the heroic struggle in Egypt. In the situation in which you find yourself, there can be no other thought but to stand fast, yield not a yard of ground, and throw every gun and every man into the battle. As to your troops, you can show them no other road than that to victory or death. Victory or death. Rommel read it twice. This wasn't a military order. This was the raving of a fanatic. Yield not a yard of ground in the middle of a flat desert against a superior enemy was suicide. It was a command to murder his own army. This was the moment the illusion shattered. For years, Rommel had told himself he was fighting for Germany, not the Nazis. He had convinced himself that Hitler was simply misinformed by his generals, that if the Führer knew the truth, he would act rationally. Now, holding that paper, he saw the truth. Hitler didn't care about the Afrika Korps. He didn't care about strategy. He didn't care about the men dying in the sand. He only cared about the map in his bunker, looking the way he wanted it to look. Rommel looked at his chief of staff, Fritz Bayerlein. The silence in the tent was heavier than the artillery outside. "He must be mad," Rommel whispered. But he didn't just whisper. He broke. For 24 hours, the Desert Fox hesitated. This is the tragedy that historians often gloss over. We like to think of Rommel as the rebel, the man who defied Hitler. But on that day, the Prussian discipline ran too deep. He had sworn an oath. The order, insane as it was, came directly from the Supreme Commander. So, he stopped the retreat. He ordered his men to stand fast. He ordered them to dig in against the impossible. He ordered them to die. And they did. On November 4th, the British armor rolled forward like a tidal wave. The Italian Ariete Division, fighting with obsolete tanks that were essentially rivets holding together sheet metal, was surrounded. They radioed their final message. Tanks broke through south. Ariete surrounded. We guess it's over. Then silence. Rommel watched the reports pile up. Every hour, another battalion erased. Every hour, another gap in the line that couldn't be plugged. He was watching the systematic murder of his own troops, executed by his own hand, on the orders of a man sitting in a comfortable bunker in East Prussia. The victory or death order hadn't brought victory. It had only brought death. Late that afternoon, Rommel walked out of the command tent. He looked at the smoke rising from the destruction of the Ariete Division. He turned to his aide, and the words he spoke then were the true end of Erwin Rommel, the Nazi general, and the birth of something else. "The dead are lucky," he said, his voice flat. "It's all over for them." But then the fire returned. Not the fire of conquest, but the fire of preservation. He realized that loyalty to Hitler meant betrayal of his men, and for a field marshal, the men come first. He made the call. He didn't ask for permission this time. He didn't send a cable. He simply turned to his staff and gave the order that would brand him a traitor in Berlin, but a savior to the survivors in the desert. "We are withdrawing. Now." The retreat was a race against extinction. It wasn't a strategic withdrawal. It was a flight. The coastal road was clogged with trucks, tanks, and walking wounded. It was a snake of desperate humanity stretching for miles. Rommel rode with them. He didn't fly out. He stayed in the dust. Every mile they put between them and El Alamein was a mile of defiance against Hitler. Every soldier who survived the night was a testament to Rommel's disobedience. But the psychological damage was done. The Africa campaign was effectively over. They would fight on for months, retreating all the way to Tunisia. But the belief was gone. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht was buried in the sands of Egypt. Rommel knew that by saving his army, he had likely signed his own death warrant. Hitler did not forgive disobedience. He did not forgive failure, and most of all, he did not forgive those who saw him for what he really was. In the back of his command vehicle, watching the sun set over the retreating column, Rommel reportedly told his driver, "I have lost the victory, but I have saved my men." It was a half-truth. He had saved some, but he had lost something far more critical: his faith. The Desert Fox had realized that the greatest enemy wasn't the British Eighth Army. It was the High Command. And as the convoy disappeared into the darkness of the Libyan desert, the seeds of the 1944 plot to assassinate Hitler were sown. Not in a conference room in Berlin, but here, in the cold realization that the leader of Germany was willing to burn his own people for a delusion. Erwin Rommel would die 2 years later, forced to swallow cyanide by the very regime he once served, accused of conspiring against the Führer. But his death didn't happen in a villa in Herrlingen in 1944. It happened in a tent in North Africa in 1942. It happened the moment he read the words, "victory or death." That was the moment the soldier died, and the conspirator was born. That was the moment he realized that courage wasn't about charging the enemy lines. Courage was about looking at a piece of paper signed by the most powerful man on earth and saying no. The Desert Fox lost the battle for Africa, but in that final, desperate retreat, he reclaimed his soul.